This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome to our FTS interviews, and I'm here with a long overdue catch up with my friend Stani. Stani, CEO and founder of AAVE, welcome back to our screens. It's great to have you.
Hey, Matteo, it's super amazing to be here. It's definitely been a while.
So, I realized when I was sort of thinking what to ask and which topic we could share, that it's not even a year that you and I actually got to know each other and got introduced and talk in person for the first time. And in the past less than 12 months, so much has happened, in the DeFi space, in your space, isn't it? It's amazing. It is almost like the 10 years of fintech are going at 10 times the speed in the DeFi space, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, we've never been so kind of like busy as we are now, but it's becoming, because of the nature how open source is built in the Ethereum community and everywhere, it kind of like because you have this permissionless nature of just coming as a developer any part of the world and just like innovating in an open system that anyone can access. It leads to a kind of like a wave where you have constant innovation, and as all code is public, it's very easy to take something that already is built and improve it a bit. And it's just like even challenging for me as a kind of like a veteran in the space to follow everything that is going on in DeFi. So, or even in AAVE, like there's so many things we're working at the same time. But definitely like this is the best times to be in DeFi, to be honest.
And, I was thinking that, DeFi, one of the main challenges is actually to become mainstream, right? And by becoming mainstream, I start thinking of like two sides, like the institutional side, when the official, the dinosaurs, as we call them in the fintech world, they are going to start getting involved. And also that like the non-geeky part of the community, like the people like me who are more passionate than knowledgeable, I want to say. And it looks to me like with the AAVE Arc, you're tackling the institutional part, right? Explain me a little bit, because I read a little bit, but no one better than you can explain the fundamentals, right?
Yeah, I mean, to understand AAVE Arc, like what's happening is that if we see how DeFi is today, for example, AAVE deployed, AAVE has been building smart contract-based systems since a few years now. But a couple of years ago, we deployed the AAVE protocol, the version 1, and now the version 2 is being live, and version 3 is being already built as well, and soon launching this beginning of the year. What's interesting here is that these protocols are built in a open permissionless system, and public blockchains like Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, and essentially DeFi is about being able to access protocols permissionless fashion without giving up custody if you don't want to, and keep yourself the accessibility that way. And then of course the transparency that you see all the transactioning, and the smart contract execution, which is like amazing, moving from papers, databases into somewhere where you kind of like understand that the system will function this way without anyone interfering it. And of course, like this kind of like an open system where anyone can participate, as DeFi for us is software, it's kind of like a bit of like a new concept for traditional finance, where you have layers of different kinds of compliance requirements, and DeFi itself is very new, novel landscape. So we got a lot of inbound, and especially from a kind of like a partner called Fireblocks, that they are actually hot wallet custodian for institutions in the space, and they approached the AAVE community saying that there's a lot of requests now participating in DeFi, but there's some things like compliance that they basically want to manage. So what happened is that the AAVE community built a new protocol called AAVE Arc, and the difference between what already exists in the Ethereum already or the other networks in terms of AAVE protocol is that you have the so-called whitelister functionality, and the whitelister can give permissions to suppliers, borrowers, and liquidators to interact with the market, meaning that, and of course, there can be multiple whitelisters.
In a kind of a safe space, if I understand.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. So, for example, if you fulfill the KYC and compliance requirements, you can actually join the market through, for example, the whitelister. And first whitelister is Fireblocks. But for example, there's a latest proposal in the AAVE governance forum where even a bank, a Swiss bank, SEBA, is asking to become a whitelister and decentralizing that function. Essentially, it's a sandbox for institutions to get all the DeFi features like the transparency, public blockchain, smart contracts, but doing it with the counterparties that went to the same compliance process.
So, Stani, what do you think can happen, or what is your wish, that will happen if like large global institutions that are maybe a little bit more forward-looking, or maybe with a higher, maybe risk appetite, right? Because it is something completely new, But if a Goldman Sachs or a BNP Paribas, would be whitelisted, what could happen?
I think it's just like it makes the AAVE Arc market more kind of like a wider, like a settlement network, because the smart contracts and the protocol itself is just software that is running on a blockchain, and it's governed by the AAVE governance. And of course, these entities and whoever is participating are also as per user owners, they can govern the market together. So what happens is that we kind of move from a system where we have companies and entities keeping settlement networks to something where you have more decentralized system. And for institutions, it means that they have a kind of like a sandbox where they can actually use DeFi until there is more, for example, regulatory clarity of using the permissionless DeFi. And this creates a kind of like a safe environment. And I think smart contracts, by using them to settle transactions, whether it's whether it's kind of like a liquidity trading swaps, it's actually very fascinating, because once the code is deployed, it's very difficult to change. It has to, like, the AAVE team or one particular counterparty can't change the execution. So you don't have to kind of like a trust middleman there. Instead, you have to go to the official governance process when you want to change risk parameters and so forth. So essentially, it reduces the need of kind of like trusting between institutions, but also it makes execution more clear and transparent. So it adds a lot of transparency into the financial markets, because when we look at 2008 and all these exposures that we had in financial products, first, of course, like the product ratings and so forth were faulty, but also there wasn't enough exposure on which of these entities were and to what extent they were exposed to each other. For example, in decentralized finance, you can calculate and estimate every exposure that there is, whether it's the debt to loan ratio in the AAVE protocol, or actually the whole DeFi space. And because of this transparency, you can actually create better risk mitigation tools as well. And that's just good for finance in general.
Indeed, and actually is also a good segue to something else that I wanted to talk about, which is can you share your view on how DeFi hopefully is not going to be yet another way to sort of extend this rich-poor gap, right? So talking about DeFi becoming mainstream, which is one of the challenges, we have to sort of be mindful of the fact that today it seems like a handful of people and institutions and companies control the vast majority of the market that by nature is so volatile that it seems to be profitable only to a little few, and actually the masses are the ones who, maybe some of them get lucky, but most of them are just, victim of their own ignorance. You see, if you see what I mean. So, how can we bring? How is DeFi bringing potentially a little bit more justice? And in a scale of 1 to 10, where we are today, in this sort of making this truly more comprehensive.
Yeah, and fair. So all about AAVE is all about creating not just kind of decentralized finance, but more impactful technology, more fair technology. And it's like decentralization blockchains, they kind of help to govern and ensure that these technologies are kept fair. And what's fascinating for us to see is that, for example, in the AAVE protocol, normally when you access finance, if you have the access to finance, you have different kinds of opportunities depending on the region you are. Maybe it might be based on kind of your customer profile and so forth. But when you interact with the AAVE protocol as a user, for example, if you are interacting from London or from Singapore, or India, you have the exact same opportunity as anyone else. So kind of it democratizes the access to those yield opportunities. Now for us, kind of that's very good. And that's just kind of a first step of going towards direction where, we have equal opportunity. But the second important thing is that these networks are actually governed by the users. So as you are supplying liquidity to the AAVE protocol, what happens is that every second you're gaining more and more governance power. And why this is interesting is that how traditional economies are built and the businesses, they're built on the basis that you have investors that are investing in companies, and then you collect revenue that goes to the shareholders, and kind of the users are the ones who are actually helping to build the products. They're kind of live testing it, they're building the value, but they aren't getting their fair share. But with the liquidity mining, for example, what is happening is that the users become owners of the protocol and they have a saying. It's the same as, for example, if you take a Uber ride from one place to another, each mile or second you get more Uber equity. Or you take a flight from New York to London, for example, or whatever the product is. So that's one thing. So these already exist, and this is happening. This is transforming how protocols are more fascinating for the actual users and impactness. But also what we are looking at is that once you have different amount of liquidity in DeFi, the next step is to think how we get part of that liquidity out of DeFi and can actually finance goals in real economy. I mean, you can finance things in metaverses. You can, finance some sort of a coffee shop or a bank in metaverse. But what's interesting is how we can use this global liquidity ocean and create trust networks and finance things that are happening, let's say, in India, Africa, and the Western countries too.
I was actually hoping for you to mention Africa sooner or later, because that is something that is very close to my heart. As you know, I mean, I'm an investor and I'm advising a number of companies and even ecosystems over there. And I wonder whether or not in a continent like Africa, where some of the regulations, especially in financial services, are literally in the making, I know a few central banks who are who have now realized that they need a regulation on purpose for innovating in digital financial services. And I wonder, well, first of all, what is the state of the art for AAVE today in Africa? If you can give me a couple, stages, and how faster, or would AAVE bring, to a continent that is, I want to say, more regulatorily flexible, as well as paradoxically way more digitized, than other parts of the world, and where the culture of transacting using just a mobile phone, even without a bank account, is already in the costumes of the people.
Yeah, exactly. For example, for AAVE, essentially we build technologies, which creates more opportunities, and I think some of the functionality is already built in the AAVE protocol itself, because we have so-called credit delegation feature, and the credit delegation means that roughly now we have, let's say, if you have 15 billion worth of deposits into the AAVE protocol, maybe out of that 15 billion, roughly like 45 billion are actually, it's actually more, 5 billion are actually borrowing out of the protocol and utilizing their borrowing power. So we have roughly 70% of the liquidity isn't borrowed out from the protocol. So what we can actually do is we can delegate that borrowing power as individuals who want to decide to fund and get additional yield to either initiatives, DAOs, or, for example, entities that are further delegating the credits and financing opportunities in Africa. And I think we're still living in a phase in decentralized finance where everything has to be over collateralized or tokenized and somehow collateralized. But I think as soon as we are starting to realize that these yielding opportunities, and we see entities and startups actually taking liquidity out of the AAVE protocol against the credit delegation, and someone does the management very well and shows an example, we see more adoption. And then we create a kind of like a two-stream DeFi market. And I think the interesting part about Africa is that there's like a lot of the digitalization there. So kind of like you have the accessibility, but also you can test the very same primitives that are in DeFi there as well. Because, for example, in DeFi, you don't necessarily need credit scoring or recourse of a loan to actually ensure that every single person repays their loan. That's not how lending worked. Let's say like even hundreds of years ago. Instead, you can use trust networks, scoring, and everything, and take that additional risk because of the nature of people wanting to accumulate their scoring. And I think once we see those startups actually realizing the opportunity, like that you can get liquidity out of DeFi and we have good ramping, then we see some interesting magic happening.
So this is really something that I would like to monitor, and because I know that there are a number of initiatives, granted, maybe in the more sort of popular places of Africa. I'm talking about South Africa and Nigeria. Nigeria is kind of like the home of crypto, for Africa right now. But it's also a place where potential is enormous. Talking about the crypto meccas, you and I almost met in Lisbon, but we didn't manage to connect. And Lisbon became sort of the place to be, for this for DeFi and crypto for a couple of weeks. But there is one thing that I've noticed is that there is some sort of a gang of how am I going to say it? Like the Peaky Blinders, of the DeFi space. And you guys also are of course friends. You're all veterans of the space. And of course, by nature, you are like backing up each other, So one could almost say that the same handful of people, has a little bit of AAVE, but is also involved in the Solana, and then in Polkadot, and then in Avalanche, and so is this good or bad? And this is like the half of a light question, to end the interview. But it really seems, which is a good thing, because at the same time, you guys are helping each other. But on the other hand, it is like complicated because you're so competing, right? So if you can share a couple of views from the high spheres, where everything seems to get decided, is that really true, or there is really a sort of in other words, it doesn't seem that the competition is that fierce. Mm-hmm. This is what it feels from as an outsider.
Yeah. And first of all, I don't think you're that outsider. I think you're following the space very, very well. So, but yeah, I think the competition is a bit different in decentralized finance and in Web3, because all Web3 is about kind of like a network effects, but outside. So let's say Web2 is about creating networks, but keeping them within the platform. So let's say if you have Facebook, Meta, you build in a way that you want to get people inside of the network and have the platform effect and keep people there and get data as much as possible. And of course, sell ads and services and whatever. Web3 is all about, you create a network to support another network and create opportunities. So for example, when Ethereum was launched, it created opportunities to create, because of the smart contract gate, create DAOs. That's new opportunities. Create also financial protocols, create social media and social graph, which is something that AAVE is also working upon. Creating this kind of new opportunities. And AAVE by itself, it's all about creating those opportunities and doing it inclusively. So for example, when we launched the protocol, there was dozens of new products created on top, yield aggregators and so forth. But also when the protocol is deployed to a new network, let's say Solana, Polygon, Avalanche, what happens is that as AAVE community, they're actually tapping into a new ecosystem, supporting new users, getting new user base. And it's more about kind of expanding the community and getting more diversity. So that's one thing. There are folks in kind of and of course, in terms of competition, you don't have any moats in traditional finance with your user base, whatever, liquidity moves very quickly in decentralized finance. And at the same time, your code is public, so anyone can actually take it. And for AAVE, our mode is just to increase the rate of innovation and do it constantly and also securely. And I would say sure, there's kind of some of them might seem like a competition, but actually it's very complementary. And we love what everyone is doing in the space securely and even experimentation wise. We recently created an experimentation pod where we're doing a lot of interesting stuff with NFTs, and we'll do some interesting stuff with DeFi as well. So I would say that it's more about everyone is in the same team, whether it's the let's say an Ethereum team or a wider let's say Web3 team or it's just all big family, and sometimes the families fight. So it does look like a Peaky Blinders sometimes.
If there is one thing that I love about DeFi is this indeed the community mission, because of course, everyone is here to do business, of course. But if there is one sort of a constant mantra that when you talk about people in this space, constantly comes back, is the word fair, and of course the pioneers will make more money than the guys come in later on. It's great, and and not all brains are created equal, and all this is great. But I think that, and I hope that what we are building, you guys are building right now, it is something that is fundamentally responding of the huge gap today in financial services, which is basically the fact that they are unfair. And the more they develop the way they were developed, the more this unfairness grows. And I really hope that DeFi will not replicate the same path.
Yeah, and I think like the cool thing is about like what I love about like Web3 is the ability to fork. So usually the governances and user-owned networks, they have to have very wide consensus because otherwise, if you don't listen to the minority, what happens is that you can fork the protocol, create a new community. So there's always this risk for like a bigger community. And what's going to happen is kind of like, you can compare this to actually like traditional businesses. It's very hard to just like replicate a bank or replicate even nation. So that's how like software is kind of like easy to get a wide consensus. So I definitely think there's like incentive for everyone to build a better system. And it's all about, listening the voices of the community and also kind of like getting people together, doing what's best for like the most impactful thing. Sometimes software isn't the right thing, it's compromises, and it's all about innovating and building new things for people.
Stani, thank you very much for share some of your wisdom with us. I wish you an incredible 2022 ahead, and I hope that before the end of the year we will sort of get back together and see how this 12 months of work will bring to the community. Stani, thank you very much again.
Thank you so much, Matteo, for having me here, and happy New Year.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with Fintech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.